much, Susan, and it's a really wonderful. I think Susan has outlined a number of very exciting and interesting possibilities for us, and hopefully they're resonating with you and opening up new ideas and reframing the way that you're thinking. And in that manner, we have a new poll for you. Yes. Oh, already. Which of these actions best resonate with you and or your organization in this future value paradigm? Are you a third space? Are you an incubator? Are you a connector, attractors, or none of the above? We have already heard about the networks and how they are exponential in that manner, and that also entrepreneurs and connectedness. So where are you in this aspect? And it's moving back and forth. Great. As that continues to happen, the next session, we actually have a breakout session for our individual artists that's going to be happening all through that. Go through the light. Go to the light over there. And that will be Sarah Kellner will be moderating the conversation with Hank Hancock, Marina Tristan, and Bob Warren. And then on our main stage, we have Sherry Dobbin and talking about the creative entrepreneurs and building the new. So as we are seeing the response of that, if we can get our respondents, our next panel of the creative entrepreneurs coming onto the table. So I hope that you are continuing to have some of that conversation at the table, because you should continue to be thinking once again about this larger question I posed to you earlier in the day about what do you want the creative economy to be, how do you want the creative economy to be advanced in Houston or your city, and what are the steps that you're taking to move that forward? Already you have helped to define what is that new value proposition and what are the actions in relationship to that new value proposition. So I will be calling on you again later on this afternoon in order to see what is the next, where you fit into that. So we almost have all of our panelists on stage.
But JJ was a system before on the studio.
Oh, really? Cool.
Well, yeah, so I was here.
I'm going to start up there just because I need to see that.
I'm just going to move this out of the way. Did you want? Okay, great.
Hello, everyone. All right, so I'm going to throw a couple of visuals up there. I'm going to stream you through some things. We are the panel of the artists and the arts institutions. So we are unapologetically, I think, considering ourselves representing arts sector. But we've got every different type of institution here. So we've got the Alley Theater, which may be a more traditional sort of setup of an institution, nonprofit institution that you recognize. Fiona, who's working in design, but also within the university. Omar, who's established the Free Press Houston, as well as 2 festivals. And Robert Hughes, an individual artist. And then myself, I'm actually situated within a business improvement district. But in answering Susan's question about, what is the potential for this new paradigm, the thing that I put down is partnerships. Shared resources matched with shared objectives to meet unusual results. So I didn't come from a lot of money, so I know a lot about debt consolidation. I know how to do a lot with what is already out there and how we can pull it together and make something much better. And the bad news is that there is not one model of how to do this and how to move forward. The good news is that there are infinite possibilities. I'm going to start with just a couple of examples so you understand that we've already been doing this. Up on the screen, you see a public art commission. This is from the MTA in New York, and this is Arts for Transit. This is a percent for art. You're taking money from capital investment. Then next, this is a project by the Public Art Fund. This is an institutional nonprofit, but they actually partnered with the city, who is in the process of already erecting this structure to save one of their monuments, to put together to be able to realize a project they wouldn't have been able to do on their own, and then bring in private funding as well. This is the Barbican Center in London. This is an example of thinking about it at the earliest possible stage, which is in master planning. So how do you think about it when you're pulling together that public and private sector transformation, where the Barbican, the Royal Shakespeare Company at the time, the London Symphony Orchestra, the Guildhall Conservancy, galleries, cafes, and of course, water. This is the Bilbao. Everybody knows about this because there's something called the Bilbao effect now, which is that from public and private partnership, you throw up something that actually creates a transformational identity. And the art museum is housing the art, but it also becomes a piece of art. It's spurring tourism, and from there then brings in additional private funding. Or there's Lyon and the Fête de Lumière, which is a bit of programming where the city wants to celebrate itself, but then it's so successful that it then is partnering with different corporate sponsorships, and it becomes something that's tied with individuals, private and public sector. Well, we're talking about a series of different collaborations where the artists partner with the site. So we've got Elizabeth Streb, who partnered with the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council to present a piece, or Somerset House in London that opens up the area that used to be secluded just for the inland revenue, and has created a bunch of different programs that happen there. Or the Jean-Claude and Christo, the Gates, where the artists have had this project and wanted to do it for almost 20 years. And it finally was a collaboration with the city that allowed it to happen. Or your very own Project Row Houses, which starts with an artist and then combines with the community, and then from that brings in the public and private investment. Or here, it's local government and regional agency combined with an artist who was already embedded in socially engaged practice to create artwork in a community that helped to redefine what changes they wanted to make. Or it's an institution like the Queen's Museum, which just opens up its space to an organization that already wanted to pursue these options. No additional money needed, just a matching of opportunity. Or in Times Square, where we've actually invited the street artists to come into the formal context of the public space and also partner not only with us, but with local festivals like the Tribeca Film Festival, and how we can encourage more of those. So Omar is going to talk to you probably a little bit about what it's like when it's artist-led. Dean is going to talk to you a bit about the partnership right now, Remote Houston, that is taking the theater outside the black box. Robert Hodge is going to talk a little bit about how working with an artist, you already are forming different types of collaborations and partnerships in order to realize the work. And Fiona is going to talk about that constant dialogue that happens between the kinds of private commissions and the work that she does here at the university and with the students. And from this, and then also just so you know a little bit about where I'm coming from and maybe why Sixto asked me to do this. My program is actually set up, yes, within a business improvement district. I own nothing. I negotiate for everything. And I do everything in a combination of artist-led, it might be bid-led, it might be institution-led, or it might be opportunity-led. It's all about how we leverage the commercial and nonprofit resources that we have and combine it into something that we all want together. As a result of this, I work with a budget that is then multiplied 8 times over by the partnerships, giving my stakeholders a much better value for money. So first, Omar.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. You know, going to be rad, you know? And the less that happens, somehow there's a symbiosis between your relevance and your relevance obviously contributes to, you know, whether this project is sustainable or not. So I've got this paradox between this summer event, which, you know, has 100 partners, and we're trying to do our best to keep it creatively relevant. But I think, you know, when it's ruddered by the budget that ultimately that's insurmountable to get beyond, does this make money? Whereas we hatched this festival in early last year, Day for Night, which, you know, our critique internally of the summer festival was, all right, so we put on these great shows, but ultimately as kids move from stage to stage, they become completely disengaged, right? So, you know, you've got this heightened intensity, you've got this concert, and then that respective musician is done, and then everything comes down. The music drops, the intensity drops. Kids go from jumping to just kind of arms crossed, and then they move like cattle from stage to stage. And I always thought that was, you know, really unfortunate, because you know, you spend 6 months hyping up this event, and, you know, in between the shows, everybody just becomes disengaged. And we figured there was a way to for the experience, you know, as they move from stage to stage, to be just as engaging as when they're, you know, staring at these artists perform, musicians. So, you know, we decided, let's really, really give the same love that we give to the musicians to the visual artists, and let's bring in some next level stuff, interactive artists, digital artists, people who are working in light art, coding, things of that nature. Brought artists from all around the world to Day for Night. Casey Rias, who, you know, is one of the forerunners in the interactive art world, in coding and whatnot. Actually wrote the software most folks that work in that world use. Brought in artists from all around the world. Tried to make it as much as we could about the art, and let the artists lead the way, not just in terms of the ethos of the event, but also the way we spent money. And we found that to be critically important, because as much as you can, you know, give a general manager the task of, well, give these guys the love they deserve, until you really empower the participating artists, and let them see, you know, be transparent, show them the books. Hey, we'd love to spend another $100,000 on these installations. Here's why we can't. We've got to do this production. Do you have a solution that provides water or shade, or, you know, whatever's clever that frees up dollars? And I'd like to feel it worked.
It did. I went. It made a major difference.
Yeah. It was a great event, and we were really happy with it. We didn't know how it would turn out. I've got 17 seconds left. I'll talk for the next 24 hours if you want. But it worked, and I think that what it did is it gave us a more sustainable model, because as we had discussed earlier, you know, this idea of patrons versus consumers, customers, really, they're fickle, right? And you know, you can keep a customer for a long time if you keep giving back to them, you know. Whereas with, you know, most festivals today, the model is, once you get to a sellout point, and I say that metaphorically and literally, once you get to that point, folks typically stop putting back into the festival. Ticket prices go up, and it's got to come from somewhere, and it comes out of the kid's pocket. So we hope what we did with Day for Night was create a model that, you know, we can keep putting back into it, and it can be around here in 10 years.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's really important about that is understanding the artists as part of your partners, giving them the credit that they know what's going on. And when you say you have that eyebrow moment, it's not just an instinct. It's actually based on years of working in your field and knowing from each other and being able to evaluate. So sometimes we think about it as like an instinct, but it's a hell of a lot of experience. Dean is going to talk to us a little bit about the Alley Theater.
So the Alley Theater, when we finished our renovation, we decided that we would expand our programming so that we'd be year-round and offer some new opportunities. And part of that expansion was to look at some international theater and works to bring in and put together perhaps in the future an international theater festival. So I went to Santiago they have a big theater festival every year, and so I went down to see their festival, and mostly we were looking at Hispanic work, but we were told about this very interesting work from this collaborative out of Berlin, and they had a project called Remote X, and then the X is always replaced with what city it's been in. And so it was Remote Santiago, and they'd done it in Berlin, they'd done it in Moscow, London, Paris, Vienna, and so we thought we'd go on this journey and see what it was, and it was one of those things where I had no clue what I was doing. You just go. Everything's usually in a different language anyway. I was really excited to find out that it was going to be done in English. And so you go to this cemetery and you get these headphones, and once you have a group of about 50 people, you go on this journey together through the city for about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. And it was so much fun, and it was such an interesting art piece because at times you were the actors, and at other times you were the audience, and everyone around you were the actors. And so you interacted with people in a different way, and of course you're being told what to do, and no one else knows what you're being told. And so when a stranger sees you on the street, they see this horde doing things, and sometimes they probably find it very amusing. Actually, most of the time they found it very amusing. And so I thought, well, this would be a great project to bring to Houston. And certainly Houston, the energy capital, is one of the great cities of the world. We should have a project like this. And there was Houston is a unique city in that it's in America, we love to travel by the automobile. And so how do you create this pedestrian experience in a city that lives by the automobile? And it really lives by the automobile. And there just aren't people out on the streets. We've got something like 250,000 people or 200,000 people downtown that work, and you'd never know it by how many people are out on the street. But you'd know if you go in the tunnels, because there's lots of people in the tunnels, but only at certain hours. And so how do you create this experience? And so we decided to look at the rush hour as kind of our pedestrian experience. So we are mounting this piece from 4 to 6. And it starts in the cemetery. And you take public transportation, and that becomes part of the event, and you end up downtown into a lot of different venues you've probably never been in before, and experience the city in a whole different way. And the reason we're able to do it, and I think get a lot of publicity, is we partnered with the Countercurrents Festival, which was the perfect audience for this piece. And when we came back, they were the first people. When I came back from Santiago, they were the first people I contacted and said, would you be interested? And it so happened that they were looking at another piece by this collaborative, Remy Protocol, and I said, well, I like that piece too, but we want to do this piece. And they said, we'll do that piece, and we can do the other one later. And so we collaborated to make this an event, and it starts the festival tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon, and then plays for the next 6 weeks. And I would recommend, if you want to experience something unusual and completely out of the box, and not be sitting in the theater seat, to be an actual participant in a piece of theater, this is a fun project to go on. And it took a lot of money to subsidize this in order to do it. And the Greater Houston Partnership, we got them involved because they're very interested in doing, looking at millennials and doing fun things in the city. And we said, you know, if we buy all this equipment, we could own it and we could do it in the future and make it part of things. I have a number of corporations that have just bought out performances and they're sending their employees on it so they can experience this almost as a team building thing. I think that once people see it, it's hard to describe until you've really experienced it. But once people see it and experience it, I think that it has the potential to have legs and could be something that we do every fall and every spring, and as a fun city event, and that you would come to Houston and say, oh, you got to do remote Houston is very cool.
Thank you. And it just goes to show that, you know, you can have a great idea and somebody else can have a great idea and you can combine it and actually make it potentially larger or run longer or achieve more for it. And the other thing is you're saying too, with the funding, you find a way in which you're not just funding an individual project, but then you're looking at something that actually builds into the organization or perhaps crosses over and addresses many audiences. Robert, would you like to share a little bit about your work?
Sure. Sixto, thank you again for inviting me. Appreciate it. My name is Robert Hodge, and I'm a multimedia artist. You can say that. I mean, I agree with Susan with this paradigm shift that's happening. I thought that was really great because we kind of been noticing that. And so while the institutions still have this power, I have a mission statement that's attached to how I make my work, and mainly it's bringing the art directly to the people. And so why I could collaborate with institutions and artists, we kind of keep that in mind because we just realized, to me, like, art is a luxury. Like, even buying paintings, going to museums, catching shows, a lot of people don't have time for that, and you have to make it worth their time. And so to even cut that out, I did a thing called a beauty box where we had an actual production inside of my neighborhood. So we cut that excuse of having to leave the neighborhood or get into your car. It happened on the block of Dowling and Holman for about 3 months. And so it happened every Friday around 8 p.m., unless it rained because it was outside. And we had artist talks, concerts, films, and we would set up free for the people. Required no money. And we actually got that grant through the Houston Art Alliance, which was really great because we could, like I said, we can bring it directly to the people. And so I think my whole Rubik's Cube of figuring out is how do I get work to the people directly, whether it's music, art, film. And so as of now, I've been working on a record called 2.5 Years. And that was initially funded through the Idea Fund. And I'm working with Tierney Malone on that record. But that's also was an idea of like, how can we get the really important, relevant information to people directly? It's like, you know, so music is being streamed now. People are not buying music. You know, you got the free press show. That's great. But so almost in the same terms, like, how can I get that to them and tell this really dynamic story? Because I'm seeing the same people at the galleries. You know, it's kind of like you preaching to the choir. I'm going to the museums. I'm seeing the same folks, and we love them, and they're buying work. But then you're like, okay, this room is getting smaller and smaller. And I'm looking at people walk by the window, and they want to come in, but they looking like, I don't know anybody in the room. It looks kind of, you know, those kind of feelings you get when you walk into a new space, especially a cube. And so I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to get work there, how to get the average person into a space, you know, and check out arts and all levels. And so that's kind of what I do in Houston. And so my work kind of opened up and changed in around 2013 because I became a resident artist at Project Row Houses, and kind of see how Rick Lowe kind of works and how the whole institution works. It kind of opened my mind up to community. And so, you know, they kind of teach that art is a one-on-one sport, but it's really not. It's kind of a team sport. And if you make it a team sport, you'll really reach community in ways you probably never thought of. And so even with the beauty box and the record, it's all collaboration, you know, from reaching out to Jason Moran and Robert Glasper and Little Kiki. These are all musicians that are like world famous, and they're from Houston. And when I initially made my list, I wasn't thinking about Houston. I was just thinking about my favorite artists. And I looked up, I'm like, oh my God, almost all these people are from Houston. And that says a lot about our city. So yeah, that's what I do. I mean, I have 3 minutes left. You know, I'm more of a like ask me questions kind of guy. But yeah, I'm a working artist, and it's a 24/7 job. And I think, you know, I stay open to all kind of possibilities and experimenting. But like I said, for me, what keeps me driving and keeps me going is my mission statement that, okay, because I think as an artist, you can easily get caught up in the institution world. Like, hey, I'm showing the museums, you know, these folks love me. You know what I'm saying? You know, like you can separate from that, but then you start realizing, like, you know, you're talking to people and they don't care about credentials. Like, you know, a lot of people in the average streets, they want to know, is the artwork great? Can they relate to it? Does it move them? And so you start dropping like, oh, I went here and I got this. They like, yeah, great. I don't like it. And to me, that's always where I kind of want to stay in the middle lane, where I can always get really great feedback from people who don't care where I've been. You know, they just care about now and what I'm doing now. And I guess, you know, some musicians say like, you only great as your last song or album. And I think it's the same way when you're a visual artist. Like, you know, you have to kind of stay relevant and communicating and keeping your space open to young artists and older artists kind of, I think, keeps you relevant on all levels of generations. And so, yeah, that's what I do. And that's my mission statement. So I'm glad to be here.
Is there an unusual treatment of taking work and then putting it in a space that you never thought of before and then having an unusual result? I mean, you're talking about how do you get people into different spaces. What's one of your favorite experiences that really surprised you?
It had to be the beauty box because I didn't know how the neighborhood would react to it. You know, it was something that's there and it's tangible, but I just love how people connected to it. Like the space got protected. It was people that stood outside at night and watched it. And like, you know, unfortunately, there's people like in Third Ward that were like homeless, and like I would just pay them because they're like, look, I'm going to protect this for you. I'm gonna make sure things are not stolen. It just became like everybody felt a part of it. And I was like, wow, when you have something here for the community and you let them know it's for them, like they kind of becomes their own. So can we all kind of share that experience, you know? And I thought that was really great. I'm like, wow, all walks of life are coming. Everybody's getting along. There's no problem. We didn't need security. It was just like, you know, a really great kind of interaction with people. And you got to, you know, kind of, like I said, you got to be really up and close and personal with somebody from a different walk of life. And so it kind of changed perspectives too. And yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what you and Omar are both talking about too is how you can be a little bit creative about your problem solving. Not everything just needs to stay as a line item in the budget and it has to be outsourced or supplier to find it. If you're creating a community and there are more people collaborating, there are more people who potentially can pitch in ways.
And some things are going to fail. You know, you gotta also be open to experimenting and also know that this might not work. And like you said, you take notes and try to figure out what works and what doesn't work, but you have to let those things happen, like failing, and like keep going.
What is it? I was told that, you know, what the best batting average is like 0.333 or something, which means basically you're only succeeding a third of the time.
Yeah.
So, okay, Fiona's going to give us a little bit of a presentation now about her work.
Yeah, I have visuals because I'm a terrible talker.
It's all right.
Okay, sorry. Like I said. Okay. And I can't see them from here, so that's okay. No. So my background is actually in graphic design, but we have a small design studio, and many of you, I'm looking out at the audience, some of the work that I'll show, it's almost so interconnected because much of what I do is hugely collaborative, and both in the studio and then what I bring to the classroom is similarly placed like that. You can see well, it's not working. That's helpful. I'm going to move on, but we have a small art and design studio, and we're pretty much media agnostic, and we like to keep it that way. In other words, when projects come to us, we like to kind of look to those projects as possibilities in terms of media collaborations, and have done so for over 28 years in Houston. This piece, when my partner Alan and I moved to Houston in 1993, at a time when planning in relation to civic art, park design, and community development was mostly non-existent. We had an opportunity to work with Jessica Cusick, who many of you I know. Then the head of public art at Catch and what is now Houston Arts Alliance, who put together a team to produce a master plan for Houston, for Houston's then public art program. The team made up of people including Kevin Shanley, John Kaliski, Rafael Longoria, Alan and I, with Jessica's vision, worked to synthesize and put into place a long-term plan for Houston's public art program. looking at communities and infrastructure, natural and man-made, as opportunities for creative connections. And this is back in 1996-7. Jessica became responsible for not only pushing through the Percent for Arts, which we obviously are dearly indebted to her for, but also for the change in distinction between public art to that of civic art, making the production of art not about the objects, but also about the places, people, and fabric of communities in Houston for the first time. The piece that I'm showing there, which is half cut off, is actually a representation of the framework from 1997. So you can see parts of it. The hand part there is the overlapping maps that were all built in vellum because we didn't have interaction design at the time, where we were drawing connections between all of the infrastructure. Projects in our studio all relate and hope to reflect the incredible learning moment, which to many may seem obvious, but but in Houston at the time became a pioneering framework for many new opportunities for the creative economy in Houston. Projects like the Metro light rail stations, where artists and designers work side by side with Metro, community stakeholders and architects change the landscape in Houston while enhancing the future of mobility in the city. All these images are gone. Another collaborative, moving on. Oh, sorry. There. Another collaborative project with Randy Twaddle and Dave Thompson of Tweak typographically details the Allen brothers' letter and manifesto and tells the story of Allen's Landing as the original port of Houston. I'm going to spend more time trying to tweak this than I am anything else. Shoot. A recent project that is still in the installation phase, and I really want to show this one. There. After this, it doesn't matter, but I can't scroll down on it. A recent project that is still in the installation phase was a commission by Tantan District. Our proposal, called Voices of Houston, became a collaboration which reached out to writers and poets, famous and new, and edited to create 130 so short quotes about Houston that will line the streets of downtown and merge with bright and engaging contextual photography of downtown Houston. We've worked on projects. There's more of the images. We've worked on projects at Jones Hall, Interlude, exhibits for Jones Hall, which included the story of Jesse Jones, whose philanthropic efforts enliven the arts in Houston with support and funding for great opera and symphonic hall. We've done work, for Houston Waterworks, which again is a collaboration with many, including the city of Houston. We've done work for Buffalo Bayou Partnership, for the master plan with Ann Olson and Guy Hadstack, and then the app that was a collaboration, and a wonderful collaboration between student interns and our studio. And working off the great art car weekend we've had this weekend, our artist-driven educational moments include art and design-driven community projects like that of Mark Dian's invasive plant eradication truck, which we designed, helped collaborate with Mark on. The flash drive, a commission by HCP, which serves to educate kids and contrasts old and new history and technology. The Haas RFP for recycle trucks brings art through the city and various communities, and again, becomes a connective link throughout communities in the city. We've worked on several library projects, again, all text-based projects that we've taken, and narrative-based pieces. This one is at San Jack South, with text by words by David Foster Wallace, a collection of obscure words from his usage dictionary. This project set about a dialogue with the Wallace Trust and continued relationships. And Match Midtown Arts Center brought together true creative initiative and innovation to make a space for all who needed the small to medium performative venue in Houston. We work collaboratively with committees made up of Houston organizations, several individuals, many of whom are in the audience, architects and fabricators, to create interactive digital marquees and signage systems. Some of the recent studio outreach projects include Animating Houston, a collaboration between my junior design students and UH architecture students to activate and animate a section of Third Ward through map pins that tell the story of loss, history, and economy and community in this district since the 1950s. We're continuing to work with the EEDC, where my students are branding and creating action-based posters and brochures to help promote their mission. That's the students.
Yeah, I see them all. I see them.
Or be
They're on them, but yeah.
Other projects by students include activating spaces through pop-up context-driven projects throughout the city, and projects that highlighted sustainability practices as an intervention project at City Hall. And then last fall, we joined Processional Arts Workshop out of New York to create large-scale typographic lanterns, in essence, word lanterns that became poetic depictions of the bayou, shifting in meaning as they float along the procession, forming and deconstructing meaning. All of these projects, both in our studio and student projects, rely heavily on connections, finding needs and shared objectives, and fostering ongoing partnerships with a variety of people, including other artists, designers, writers, architects, fabricators, planners, and organizations, as a way of telling the best story about place, history, and context. And without whom our studio and certainly the students' relationship with collaborations that we're doing and trying to instill in them, we couldn't do. Sorry
Thank
for
you.
reading.
Yeah. No, but you segued nicely. One of the questions I was going to ask are, who actually are the various partners that we work with. So Omar, can you tell us who are the partners in making Free Press happen? The website as well as the festival.
Sure. Well, we've got about 12 landlords. Those guys are important, which are, because we're in a city park, obviously we're working with Public Works, the Parks Department, the Buffalo Bayou team, who you had mentioned earlier, Guy and them are really awesome. Mm-hmm. Also, a few nonprofits, and really, I think the biggest. One of the biggest groups that we work with is this customer base. We see them as, because they're the most vocal, and so they're definitely stakeholders. And when it comes to live music, people take it really personally. So ultimately, even though you're working with you're auditing social media and you're trying to reduce all the voices down to one voice, you're really, how do I say this? I don't want to use the word mob, but you're working with a group that's amorphous and really kind of getting your finger on the pulse of what they're trying to say. I'd say is the hardest thing. The city and artist groups and all those stakeholders. They have a definitive voice as to here's what we're doing, here's what we want, whereas your attendees, your customers, your consumers, that's the biggest challenge, is finding out what do they really want. Because some of them say this and some of them say that.
So finding what maybe that new answer is for them that they couldn't even anticipate. I mean, Robert, do you see this in your work, that as you're working with people, particularly when you're taking it outside of a formal institution and you're bringing it more to people, that you change even what you're doing based on who you're encountering and who you're working with? And
no, I try to keep it really authentic, and I feel at this point, like if you come into me, you kind of know what I do and what I'm bringing, and and I guess staying relevant and having those connections kind of brings, it's going to bring some really dynamic artists, young and old. It's not age specific at all. It's just about people making really great things. And like I said, I'm into generational crossing things. I love having really older artists who people might have forgot about, who I know are genius, and bringing them in with a 19-year-old. He's like, who is this, 65-year-old? So it's like all this new mashup of Houston. So, I try to keep it pretty authentic, you know, and bending depends on what it is. I mean, I'm always open to grow the audience, to have more people come and check it out. So, I mean, I will, of course, you know, negotiate those things, but try to keep it to what it was, you know, originally,
Yeah, never compromise on the idea.
you know.
Dean, we were talking earlier about partnership and how does one make it happen? And you had some thoughts about this. Do you want to share?
Well, you know, I've worked with organizations. My first organization had a budget of $30,000. So I've worked in all sizes of organizations.
Mhm.
So what I found is you can collaborate. All you have to do is just find partners and find connections with people that are interested in doing what you're doing. And you know, it's not an easy thing to do. And a lot of times you don't have a direct connection to the person that you want to collaborate with. But if you can find that intermediate person that knows you and knows them, that introduction enables you to do projects that are way beyond the scope that you can imagine. And any urban project that you do, you've got to have tons of partners because you're lots of people when you're doing festivals. Any public artwork, you've got to have lots of partners because it's all public art. But small projects that are community-based projects. We did a project at the Alley this past year. Well, it was just a few weeks ago with the Telling, which is all on veterans telling their story about being in war, and it was every war. And we're doing a piece called Grounded right now at the theater. And so we brought the Telling Project, they're their own nonprofit, and they did performances with these veterans inside our space while we were performing this other piece about drones downstairs in our small theaters. So there's lots of ways to partner, and you don't have to be a big guy. You can be just one person, but look for those connections, and then I think that'll work for you.
Mm. And Fiona, what's the most unusual partner or collaborator you've had on one of your projects?
I might be in the room, I better be careful.
Just a type, then a profile type, maybe.
No, you know, I think because of the nature of who we are, we work with so many different groups and organizations, and certainly different people who are fabricators, developers, and different kinds of design. So, you know, I think ultimately, as you know, my background is in graphic design, and I can't label myself that anymore, which I'm delighted about. And I think the whole idea of this fourth paradigm has existed within design a lot longer than perhaps kind of art fields, because we're always trying to kind of make these connections, you know, big connections, small connections. And I think in partnership with my husband, because he came out of art, I think we've always kind of been less interested in kind of labels and more interested in the big picture of things, which allows for a lot more collaborations to happen in the most beautiful and kind of fluid way. And we're always looking for those relationships. So I didn't answer your question because I might get into trouble. So.
No, but you gave a far better answer. I think, you know, like Susan brought up the point about the institutions, you know, it's not that they shouldn't exist, it's how do they change. And one of the ways in which institutions are extremely valuable is, like Dean is saying, very often they're the connectors. Or in my job, I like to say that I translate English to English all the time. Mm-hmm. I have one way to talk to, you know, the developers. I have one way to talk to the financial services. I have one way to talk to the city. I have one way to talk to the artists, another way to talk to sign holders. But I'm still always going for the same quality and the essence of the work. I just explain it differently sometimes. And we have just hit the time where we open it up to questions from everybody out there. Is there something you would like to ask anyone here in sort of deconstructing the process?
I guess I want to share. You just actually just talked about you taking English to English. How did you learn that, and and what are the ways in which you've actually helped share that information? Because this is.
Oh, right. Okay. I guess from absolutely not doing what you were supposed to do, So I got trained in one thing and then got interested in something else and followed it for a long time and then got a degree in something else and then found out about something else. And I have always followed what interests me. And then I've always sought whatever sector or group that was or type of artist that works that way. And then, like you say, you never know. You might get what you ask for. So the other big key is really ask for what you really want. Somebody else actually may really want to do it, or they may have really wanted to do it anyway, but were afraid to ask. So, I mean, my experience started in theater as a performer and has ended up with this. And to be fair, I think my theater training is the most important thing because theater is all about collaboration. You never expect you're going to do it on your own. I mean, you know, even the one-man shows are never done with just one man. And it's about listening. And the other thing about theater that you always know is you always are monitoring your other people on stage for what they're afraid of and what they're good at. And you're always trying to find the balance. I'm always trying to adjust to what somebody is afraid of, and I'm always trying to find out what it is that can help strengthen them. And that is something that I've learned from theater. Not to mention the fact that we always have to put on a little bit of a show when we speak English in different ways.
Absolutely.
Questions? Oh, come on. If
But I did have a
not,
question.
if not, Ms. Burlesque over here has a question.
No, I do have
and
a
I want to
question.
hear from her.
I think I missed what the beauty boxes, or what is it called? The project?
Oh yeah, the beauty box.
Yeah, what is that?
So it was a 3-month installation that I broke down in 3 parts. So the first month was the artist talks, and then we had the film, and then the third part is like the dessert. It was just free concerts. So I'll bring in local and national artists to perform for the neighborhood. And so the idea was to travel that from neighborhood to neighborhood into country to country. So right now I'm designing it so I can have a portable beauty box, so I can break down in any city.
You
It
mean like
just-
Times Square?
Anywhere. It just
I mean,
requires,
we're
you
not
know.
a city, but you know.
Yeah, anywhere. So, you know, like you said, but you know, a critical part is money and fabrication. And so that's what we're working on now. Well, thank you, man.
Right behind you, Sixto.
Thank you. This is just based on what Robert said earlier, when you said you were making the list of musicians and then you realized how many of them were based in Houston. Again, I bring performers from everywhere, and I just want to know how you guys deal with this, that it's easier to generate a lot of buzz and get a big audience reaction when I'm saying this person's from LA or St. Louis or wherever, and people really want to come out, even if the talent isn't even necessarily as good as what we have here in Houston. And I guess just trying to build up that buzz and get that same excitement for local artists as well, because I think a lot of people don't even realize what's here. It's kind of like, oh, it's always here, but come see it. And so is that something that you deal with, or if you have any suggestions for that?
Go ahead. You do Summerfest.
Yeah. I think to a certain degree, this very hyper local movement that's been happening is sometimes dangerous. Incubators are good, but you want to be able to get out of the incubator. And ultimately, art should be a meritocracy, right? So you want to provide that space for local artists, but you want to do it in the spirit of putting the best on, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to say, well, we'll take something, so obviously that's going to change year to year, moment to moment, discipline to discipline. And, but I think, including local artists, you shouldn't do it just because, like, you don't,
Yeah,
I want my
sure.
olive oil to be from the Mediterranean, not from Iowa. You know what I mean? So,
It has to be dynamic. You got to realize the artists that are from Houston that I said that they're super dynamic. Like Jason Moran won the MacArthur, and Robert Glasper has 2 Grammys. So while they're local, there's still some padding there that people say, oh yeah. And then I slide in local artists who I think are really amazing, who nobody knows, but the key word is they're amazing. And when you hear them, you're not going to care where they're from. They just happen to be from Houston. But I also know that, those things like LA and New York, people still respond to that. So it's important to put that in something like an album. But I make sure I pad really amazing people I meet along the way and put them in. And whatever happens from that happens. But yeah.
Well, the other thing is, of course, when artists go somewhere else, they want to meet the artists of the place as well. They want to connect with that community. So it
Yeah.
is that balance that
Yeah.
seems to be so rich. It's the same thing with sort of age or position, you know. Established artists don't want to just work in their own group. They want to be able to work with the youngest, most emerging artists so that they're seen, you know, not just seen to be, but are relevant and have that conversation. And the younger artists want to work with the established ones, so it helps to establish their their credibility. So that mix is incredibly important to the value of the artwork and the experience, not just, you know, what looks good for marketing or bringing in the audience.
Absolutely.
Hi. So this is just going to be really quick, really simple question. I was born and raised in Austin. This is for Omar.
I'm sorry you're from Austin.
No, I'm living here now, so I guess that's okay.
Welcome.
Yeah. So I've been to ACL 5+ years, and I just want to say salute to you, day for night. Hands
you.
down, was one of the best experiences I've had in my musical festival experience. So
Awesome.
congratulations. I think it was the perfect blend between art, visual art, and music. Everything you said,
Thank you.
I definitely applaud too. But when is the next one?
coming up, right?
The next one's going to be in December, but we're also going to be putting on a smaller day for night in New York, as well as a medium-sized one in San Francisco.
We don't
Fabulous.
know.
Is there any opportunity maybe to have a catalog of the artists that were there?
Yeah, you bet.
I think I was really impressed. And
For sure.
Again, congratulations.
Thank you. You know, a lot of the great things that happened were in spite of me, not because of me. So don't, I don't want to say, oh yeah, I did it. But at the same, you know, the success we had was part and parcel of, I think, just us saying, let's open it up to anybody and everybody, and all those people who are participating, really show them the guts of what's happening. Because, you know, oftentimes in a business, you don't want to, you know, you don't want your vendors to know, like, hey, we're struggling to get this done, or, you know, we don't know if this has value, or so on. So there's this, everybody's kind of holding their cards close. And this was a really weird experience where, you know, all the employees and all the artists and all the staff, we were sharing budgets, you know, and really showing people what's under the hood. So I think when you have that level of transparency, people suddenly say, duh, I get it. This is why this has to be this way. Let's find some creative solutions.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yes. I would just like to know, I imagine that at some point in your careers, you had moments of self-doubt. And moments where you're wondering, am I really going to go from just being an artist to being this creative entrepreneur, this title that for me is new? And what got you to the point where you went ahead and you said, all self-doubt aside, I'm going to go forward with this. So that's, I don't know if everybody heard, but that was my question. Did you have self-doubt, and how did you deal with it and go past from transitioning from artist to creative entrepreneur?
Can I say something really quick? Every morning I wake up and say, why the hell am I doing this? It doesn't, no, it's never going to go away. It's twice a week. Like, I didn't sleep Friday, Saturday night, and I woke up Sunday like, what am I doing? It never goes away. You just have to keep pushing through. For me, the fear, I just keep talking myself into it every morning. I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? So no.
Every time I have to explain to my CFO
Exactly.
why I've decided to hire somebody.
Yeah. All the time.
Go ahead. Anybody want to share?
Well, I'm an administrator. I was a musician early in my career, but you know, you have to take risks as an administrator the same way. And I remember having to do my first capital campaign, and I got hired to do this big job and finish off this Philip Johnson Theater building, and I'd never done a capital campaign in my life, and that's what I was hired to do. So I just did what any normal person would do. I went to the library, got a book, and raised the money.
Don't give up on libraries. Anything you want to share?
I
Yeah.
think in terms of your level of self-doubt, it really comes up when you're raising money, because the question that always reoccurs is, so what if this doesn't happen? If everything crashes and burns, and let's say everything goes wrong, and that happens all the time. I'm really good at it. But that said, you also have to ask the question, what if I don't do it? So I think that's really the fork in the road of self-doubt is, yeah, everything could go wrong, but it's not going to happen if you don't do it. So
Yeah.
I think you have to have that motivation to make it succeed, always make it succeed. You work until it's done. And no matter what the project is, you're going to see it through and make it a success. Because if you don't, then you're a failure. So I don't want to be a failure. So I'm going to make sure that I get it done. So I'll find the money.
I think it switches from if to how. How am I going to make it happen?
Yeah.
And I think at that, we're out of time. So thank you to my panelists who I just met today and had a real pleasure of being able to find out more about you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So clearly, there's a lot of conversation and discussion that everybody would like to have, and hopefully we can continue that conversation. We do have a bit of coffee and some cookies, but we will also have PowerPoints available online from on our website for at least our opening speaker, as well as our Susan's lunchtime talk as well.